Hello, in this video, we are going to be discussing Unit 3, Activity 3. And in this video, in this activity, we are continuing to read The Great Gatsby. And you should this week be reading chapters 5 and 6. And in the activity, we're going to focus on character. And the assignment that you'll do this week will revolve around Great Gatsby characters. So if we click on Unit 3, Activity 3, and then we take a look here, you'll see at the beginning there's a little setup and there's a little explanation about the popularity of the characters in The Great Gatsby. Still to this day, the book is about 100 years old, but still to this day, the main characters in this book are extremely famous in the world of literature. There's obviously been numerous movies made about The Great Gatsby, and so these characters are kind of legendary and they've lived on. So Jay Gatsby himself, Daisy Buchanan, Nick Carraway, these characters are still, have a legacy that has gone on for 100 years. So we're going to try to explore these characters a little bit in this activity, and we're going to try to use some of the character terminology and concepts that we learned in Unit 2, like flat and round and character archetypes, and we're going to try to apply them to The Great Gatsby. And so if we start, one of the interesting things about this book is that the narrator, who is Nick Carraway, so this book is a first-person story because one of the characters is also the narrator. But what's interesting is we have an unreliable narrator. Nick is not telling his own story. He gives background on himself and he talks about some other characters and some other people and his family and that. But by and large, Nick is focused on Jay Gatsby's story. So this is unusual to have a first-person story with a narrator that is not telling his or her own story. The narrator is telling somebody else's. And so for that reason, we can't really trust everything that Nick says because he's not getting into Jay Gatsby's mind and he doesn't know exactly what Jay Gatsby is thinking. And so that's one of the interesting things about the book is as you're reading, don't necessarily take everything that the narrator, Nick, is saying as absolute truth, because some of the times he's talking about events that he's not even witnessing. So that I think it adds an extra level of sort of mystery and interest to the book in the fact that we can't entirely rely on our narrator. So that's something I would expect you to understand and maybe be able to explain is the fact that Nick is an unreliable narrator. Okay. And then you've got a little article here you can read about how much can we trust Nick Carraway. So if you want to take a look, you can take a look here. And I'd be curious to know, in your opinion, whether you believe and trust Nick or whether you kind of think that maybe he's not getting this story correct and maybe he's not really seeing who the real Jay Gatsby is. Okay. All right. If we continue on, another character type that we hear a lot about when we talk about The Great Gatsby is a femme fatale. And Daisy Buchanan is one of the most famous femme fatales in literature and literary history, right? And what we mean by a femme fatale is usually a woman who is beautiful and charming and flirtatious and young, and she attracts men. But when men hang around her, or when men, try to win her, maybe it's not for the best. Maybe she causes more problems than happiness she creates, I guess. I had a student a few years ago when I was teaching The Great Gatsby that referred to Daisy Buchanan as Danger Woman. And I thought that was an interesting way of saying femme fatale, right? She's a beautiful, attractive woman that all of these male characters sort of are interested in and want to get to know, but maybe getting to know her might not always lead to positive outcomes. And so we call her a femme fatale. Another interesting character breakdown in the book is hero versus anti hero. And this book, I would argue, does not have a traditional hero. It doesn't have a traditional good guy that's brave and is doing things to help other people and is selfless. I would argue that just about everyone in this book is selfish, and just about everyone in this book kind of looks out for themselves and does what's best for themselves. And so, especially with the character of Jay Gatsby, people will argue that he is an anti hero, meaning he's not really your traditional hero that you see in many types of books. He's not like Superman or Harry Potter, right? Um, I find that to be an interesting argument. When we say anti-hero, we don't mean villain. We don't mean a bad guy. So I'm not saying that Jay Gatsby is a villain, but he's not really a hero either. He's kind of somewhere in the middle. And so I'd be interested to know, if you take a look here at the definition of an anti-hero and you look at some examples of anti-hero, I'd be curious to know whether you see Jay Gatsby as a true hero or whether you see him as an anti-hero. And I guess that kind of depends on your perspective and how you view him as a character. All right. With that said, I don't want you to forget about the types of characters that we talked about in the previous unit. So flat, round, static, dynamic. I would definitely expect you, say on a final exam or say on a future assignment, I would expect you to be able to tell me whether you think certain characters in the book are flat or round and be able to explain why. Same thing with static or dynamic. I would expect you to be able to come up with examples of static and dynamic characters in the novel. Static and dynamic is probably something that I would ask more about when we're finished the book, because usually you want to wait to the ending of the book to decide whether a character has learned something important or not. But flat and round, as you'll see when we get to the assignment for this week, is something that I would expect you to be able to do right now in the middle of the book. I would expect you to have an opinion about whether the characters are flat or round. We also, in the previous chapter, talked about character archetypes. And that's something like when we talk about anti-hero and when we talk about femme fatale, these are kind of new types of archetypes that we have that we didn't talk about in Unit 2. So I would expect you to sort of add them to your list of archetypes, and I would expect you to be able to apply the archetypes that we learned in Unit 2. So hero, villain, mentor, caregiver, risk taker, the types of character archetypes that you applied in Unit 2. I would expect you to apply them again in the novel here. Okay. All right. So with that said, that covers what I want to talk about in terms of character in the book. Remember, you're reading chapter 5 and 6 this week, and these are your chapter questions. As always, you can open up the chapter questions in Google Docs and type out your answers, but I would you don't have to do them in paragraphs or anything like that. It's just meant to be done in point form. You're not submitting the chapter questions to me. They're for your own study guide. Okay. When you get to the bottom here, you can click on assignment. And our assignment this week relates to Great Gatsby's characters. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to click and open the Great Gatsby character chart, and I'll open it up in a second here. I've shown you what it looks like right here on the assignment page, but what you're going to do is you're going to fill out the Google Doc that I've sent you. So if you click, it'll ask you to make your own copy. So as usual, just click make a copy. And then you have your own copy of the character chart. And I'm just going to ask you to fill out this chart and then upload it and submit it to the Dropbox. And I've got 4 columns that I want you to fill in, and I have 8 characters. So 4 on the first page and 4 on the second that you're going to describe. And so the first column is physical appearance. I want you to describe the characters in the chart. I want you to describe their physical appearance, and you can take specific details right from the book. If you go back to the first time that each of the characters are introduced, you usually get a decent amount of physical description that you can jot down. Now, I've blacked out Nick. You're not going to have to describe Nick's physical appearance because his physical appearance really isn't described very much at all in the book. But for Daisy, for Tom Buchanan, for Jay Gatsby, if you go to the next page here, you've got Jordan Baker, you've got Myrtle Wilson, you've got George Wilson, and you've got Meyer Wolfsheim. For each of them, you should be able to find good specific detail right from the book to describe their physical appearance. And again, the key here is physical appearance. Don't tell me anything about their personalities here. If they're smart or if they're kind or if they're, friendly or whatever, that's personality. I just want you to stick to physical appearance. So what do they physically look like? If you want, maybe the types of clothes that they wear, but only their appearance, not their personality. The second column, this is where we're going to get into personality. And what I'm going to challenge you to do is I'm going to challenge you to describe each of the 8 characters. And this time you are going to describe Nick Carraway, but describe each of the 8 characters in 3 adjectives. So I just want you to pick 3 good adjectives that would describe 3 different personality traits for each of the characters. And I'm only asking for 3 words in each box. So please don't go beyond 3 words. You don't have to write paragraphs here. But since I'm only asking for 3 words, I would like you to come up with kind of descriptive and kind of well thought out words. So maybe try to go beyond happy, sad, nice. Try to come up with good descriptive words that would describe each of these 8 characters, and try not to repeat yourself. So you wouldn't want to say happy, joyful. The happy and joyful mean the same thing, right? So see if you can come up with 3 adjectives that describe different personality traits for each of the 8 characters. In the next column, you're going to have to find a line of dialogue for each character. And when I say a line of dialogue, I mean something that each character says out loud in the book. So something that has quotation marks around it, dialogue that is being spoken in the book. So you're going to find a quote for Nick, a quote for Daisy, a quote for Tom, for Jay, etc. You're going to find a quote for each of the characters. And trust me, each of the characters speaks, plenty of times in the book. You can find multiple quotes for each character, but I'm just asking you to pick one. Pick one line of dialogue for each character, and then explain why, why that line of dialogue shows why you like or dislike the character. So if you provide a quote for Nick that you think's a really positive quote that you really like, then tell me, what is it that you like about it? What does it show you about Nick that you like? Or if you grab a quote from Tom, and there's plenty of quotes for Tom where he says kind of rude and not very nice things, but just if you get a quote for Tom, explain to me why you like or dislike the quote and why you like or dislike the character. So we're using lines of dialogue to help us explain our opinion, our personal opinion about each character. Okay. And then last but not least, flat or round. I'm just going to ask for each character, tell me whether you think that character is flat or whether that character is round, and then give me two examples from the book to support your opinion. So if you think a character is flat, well, give me two examples from the book that show me that that character is always behaving the same way. If you think a character is round, well, give me examples from the book that show me that that character behaves in opposite ways. That maybe sometimes the character behaves kindly, and sometimes the character behaves, extremely rude or in a sort of nasty way. So see if you can. Again, if you're going to tell me the character is round, you have to show me opposing behavior. Show me that they behave differently. If you're going to show me that if you're going to tell me the character is flat, you've got to show me that the character is always behaving the same. And to do that, you're going to need two examples. Okay, and that's it. You're answering these four questions for what I would consider are the 8 main characters of Great Gatsby. And when you're done, as always, you're going to share it with me, and you're going to submit it on the to the Dropbox in the on the course website. And that's it. That's your assignment for this week. You can read more about each column right here. If you have any questions, please let me know. And if you're having any trouble with the book, please let me know.